All right, so today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about cravings. This is something that has been known to be a real point of frustration. Cravings are something that has thrown a lot of women off their plan. And honestly, this really does go back to how you're setting the stage for what it is that you are doing in the first place, why it is that you're doing, what's that foundation, and is that solid or is it kind of on quicksand? And then how you're starting your day and how you are presenting yourself in the world and the way that you are thinking about this journey, right? Whether it's about health or it's about weight loss or it's about fitness or it's about all three of them, the way that we frame that in our minds gives it some structure. And again, if it's built on quicksand and or there's no structure, then of course it's going to be real easy to, there's a lot of different sayings, fall off the wagon or find yourself in the ditch or not ever really get the momentum that you're looking for. And I just wanted to say right now, however long that you are going down the road, you're really only 2 feet from the ditch. However long that you've been in the ditch, for some of us, it feels like a lifetime. You're only 2 feet from the road. So that little bit of inspiration, that little bit of hope, that little bit of momentum, that little bit of New Year's resolution or this next Monday or this next diet, that little bit of hope is real. It's real. Don't discount it. Don't shove it to the side and say, oh, of course I'm going to, fail this time as well. We are all going to quote fail depending on what parameters we have around what that means, right? But remember, again, as long as you've been in the ditch, you're only 2 feet from the road. So we can get back up as many times as we need to and be cruising down that road together. Of course, when you have support, then you end up moving to the inside of the crowd. So as you're kind of wobbling along the road, you can stay on the road for a little longer before you say hello to the ditch again. Okay, so I want to talk about cravings because this is a really big thing. It can be a really big problem for a lot of people. There's a lot of confusion around it. So just as a kind of like a general overall, a craving can be a lot of different things, right? It can be physical. So your physical body, so somewhere along the way, there's a stimulus, right? There's some kind of stimulus. And sometimes it's a nutritional deficiency. That's a totally real thing where your body's like, hey, I need this, right? Like those guys on the ships years ago that got scurvy, I bet they were craving vegetables at some point, right? Like their body was screaming to them, get some vegetables and fruit in this body because we don't have vitamins that we need, then you get scurvy. And there's all kinds of health issues that come along when we don't have the proper vitamins. So yeah, the way in which the physical body gets nutrients in there so that it can survive and like all the parts can function properly is by eating and drinking. So it makes sense that if there's something void in the body, that the brain, the hypothalamus that like scans the brain for nutrients and makes sure that like everything's cool. If it notices that something's off, it'll be like, eat, right? Drink. Right. And that totally makes sense. If there's something in the world to eat or drink and we're getting the signal to eat or drink, like that makes sense. We're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with us. I remember watching a Dr. Oz show years ago, and this woman came in, she was about 450 pounds, and he did a full workup on her, and actually all of her organs and everything were fine. He said, there's one thing going on with you though. And she was like, what? I'm desperate. Like I've literally tried everything. Like I cannot stop eating. And he said, well, actually, you're malnourished, meaning you're actually nutritionally, you're starving. You might be eating and eating a lot to sustain 450 pounds and not lose any weight, but your body thinks that it's starving. So you're constantly getting the signal to eat because the things that you're putting in there don't have the nutritional value that your body actually needs. And, or you're not able to assimilate it. That's also another problem, right? You can shove all the things in there, but if your organs aren't working properly and it's not able to actually break down the food and then absorb the nutrients and send it to where it needs to go, that's also a problem. So there's some kind of stimulus, right? Like either the brain and the body say, I need nutrition, and it sends a signal to eat food. There's also emotional stimulus in the world, right? Because we have memory. We have memory of things that were enjoyable, things that were pleasurable, things that hit the little dopamine receptors. And sometimes that can be the actual food itself that kind of stimulates that inside the body. And sometimes it's memories, right? And sometimes they're positive. Usually the ones that we're attracted to are more positive. We remember feeling kind of like safe and comfortable when we were eating this thing or the other thing. Or, you know, when the parents were fighting and grandma used to take you to ice cream or something like that. So there's an emotional tie to whatever the food is. So we've got a stimulus. It's either physical, it can be emotional, it can also be spiritual, right? They talk about having like a hollow leg, eating as if you have a hollow leg, right? Or you're trying to fill a God-sized hole. I've heard that saying before too, where there's no amount of food that actually is satisfying, because what you're trying to do is actually fill a need, a comfort, a nourishment that only God can give. And so there's lots of ways, right? So we have the physical, we have the emotional kind of hunger and cravings. We have spiritual hunger and cravings. And all of these things need to be nourished in different ways. And honestly, quite frankly, if that is not something that we learned or that we are intentionally practicing in our lives, it can get confusing. And it totally makes sense that these things get all kind of put together, because oftentimes when we go to spiritual health, they often are also feeding us things that tend to also stimulate the dopamine receptors and like make us feel kind of comfortable and warm and safe, which is a good thing. But now if you are in this group, I imagine if you're listening to this right now, there is some part of you that's like, okay, I totally get that. I'm not going to judge myself. That's number one, right? We're going to stop condemning or judging or blaming, and really just kind of being open to different interpretations, being open to a little bit different understanding of ways in which we can nourish ourselves that are a little bit more intentional and a little bit more conducive to health on all of the various levels. Not just the physical, or not just the emotional, or not just the spiritual. There's other ones too, right? Psychological, social. We have our social health and wellness. That's really important. Our financial health and wellness. There's lots of aspects of wellness. We're just going to kind of keep it a little bit simple as we're talking about cravings today. Okay, so we have some kind of stimulus that happens, just so that we can kind of get an idea of like what that feels like. It's similar to like when you're thirsty. You ever been like super thirsty and it was really freaking clear, like all that you needed and wanted was some water, right? Like literally when you're thirsty and it's hot, nothing is as amazing as a nice glass of ice water. It's like almost magical. So it's that kind of feeling where you're like, you're thirsty and you're like, there's like one thing that's going to satisfy that. And you know exactly what it is. Again, hunger can be a little bit different. Cravings can be a little bit different, because you're like, why am I craving this? Am I actually nourished? Am I physically nourished? Now that's number one, and really where intention comes in. And that's one of the reasons why with my clients, when I'm working with people one-on-one, and when I'm working with them in groups, when they've really made that decision to step up out of whatever habits and patterns and behaviors that they were having into some more consistency and really make a change that solidifies their path, and they stop falling off into the ditch, or at least for less time that they're in there, that being intentional with our food and making sure that we don't wait the whole day until we get home to think about what we're going to have for dinner. That's not a good method. It doesn't support us in the way that we want to be supported. When we get to the day, our willpower is tapped out, our motivation is tapped out, we're exhausted and we're hungry. Awful time to then go, what should I cook for dinner, right? Not awesome. So we want to backtrack and set ourselves up for success so that we are on solid foundation, so that we are fully nourished throughout the day, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, taking that time. And of course, we have the time, right? All of us have the same 24 hours in a day. So if there is any one of us that's like, I literally don't have the time, I know that you are not going to create it, but you can take it. And I'm just here to tell you right now that you are worth it. You are worth 30 seconds in the morning to center and meditate and be intentional with how you want to nourish yourself for the day so that you can show up to all the other moments of your life on solid foundation and full. Oh my God, just like imagine that for a moment. Imagine all the different segments of your life, all the different places in which you show up for other people, which that's usually what it is. If we feel like we don't have time, it's because we're doing stuff for other people, right? If you were able to show up to each of those full, on solid foundation, fully nourished, satisfied, physically, emotionally, spiritually, it's like, whoa. And all of a sudden, time starts to bend and you start to have more time. And all of a sudden, your energy starts to expand and grow, and you didn't even know that it was there. And it's freaking awesome. Okay, so back to craving. So we have a stimulus. So sometimes it's like a thought, right? Sometimes we're just cruising along our day and someone either walks by, or we remember a commercial, or we have oh, I'm hungry and it's 2:00. And if you've been doing whatever certain habit for 20 years, then it makes sense that your mind is going to remind you of whatever you used to do at that time in that place, right? And so often we get frustrated with ourselves for that, when really that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Now, we're not necessarily responsible for our first thought, because our mind just gives us what it thinks that we want, what we programmed it to do. So old thoughts, old ideas, old habits, old patterns, all of that stuff from the media, stuff from culture, all of that jazz. But we do have then responsibility. We are responding to our own abilities to be intentional about that second thought. And that's really where we have the ability to transform, or not just transform, but to halt, like a dead halt to the self-sabotage that sometimes happens when we let our cravings get out of control. So it starts as a thought, and then kind of can go into a feeling, right? We're now it's one thing in the brain, and now I'm feeling it in the body. Maybe I've really taken that thought and I've gone with it, and I start imagining actually eating it. And then I have the feeling. And then, if I am not wanting to eat that food, then I start judging myself about it. It's no, you shouldn't have that. And we start doing a whole head trip about it, where it's well, should I and shouldn't I? Well, I kind of deserve it. Maybe if I had just a little bit, no one would notice. Then I would have to tell this person. It can go into a feeling where we start to feel it in our bodies, right? The story moves into the body, and then it kind of can become a desire. It starts to become a fantasy, right? Where we're imagining it, where we would go, and who would be there, and if somebody else was going to be there. And then there's something different that begins to happen, and I call it the urge. So that's more a feeling inside where your body is being drawn to it. And then a calling. I mean, talking about it out loud seems kind of silly and funny, right? This is usually a very personal experience that we don't tend to really share on this kind of level with people, because we just don't. Sometimes we're unaware of it, and sometimes it's such a personal thing. And there's a lot of judgment that we can have to ourselves about how we're supposed to do it, how we're supposed to behave, what's really happening here. So sometimes that urge where it's you're not really thinking about it anymore. Now it feels like you have to do it. And you're trying to justify in your mind how it's all going to happen. And then it can become this a calling, that it seems as if whatever that food is talking to them. You want to eat me. This is going to be really good. We won't tell anybody. Come here right now. nobody's in the room, grab it real quick and shove it in your pocket. Now we've lost our ability of reasoning. We've lost our ability to control. Now, once we kind of get past the thought and we get into all of these other things, now we've moved past where we have real ability to, it's not that it's impossible to make a change at that point. It has so much momentum. The story and the feeling and the craving, we got the body, and we got emotions involved, we've got our history, we've got judgment. There's so much momentum going in this direction that's not really the time. Think about and be intentional about cravings, right? That's not the time that we want to then go, okay, now let's think about what it means to have a craving and do something different. By that time, and God bless, I love people that tell me that they've gone to the place of calling and picked up the phone and called me instead, right? Or called a friend, or posted, inside of the group or Facebook, or went for a walk, or read a book, or took their ass to the bathtub and just let them, just sit in there and don't do anything, let the craving pass. Because it does. Of course it does. That's the one consistent thing that we can count on for 100%, is that all energies pass. Whatever's coming up, whatever's happening, however real it feels, guaranteed it will pass. That's just the deal. Things change emotionally. And so that's really beautiful, right? We take that detour and we want to have in our toolbox, we want to have things like that where we're like, okay, I could journal, I could write, I could call a friend, I could read a book, I could go for a walk, I could jump in the hot tub, right? There's a whole list of things that we could do instead of just giving into this like food thing over there talking to us. And what we do ahead of time matters. Right? The morning routine, your evening routine before that, the way in which you set out intention, energetic intention into the day makes a difference. And it makes a huge difference in the amount of cravings that you have, the duration of the cravings, the intensity of the cravings, whether it moves from the thought all the way down to a calling or not. Right? It makes a huge difference. So this is one of the things we want to get out ahead of what's happening. We want to set intention for the day. And this is where a little bit of meditation, a little bit of journaling, and a little bit of consistent coaching, whether it's group, whether it's personal, whether it's one-on-one, right? Those moments that we have with each other to reboot our system. So I usually meet about every 2 weeks with my mastermind group. And I cannot tell you how many times in a row, years, right? Where I would go, oh, well, everything's okay. I don't really have anything to talk about. And then once I start talking, like I'm in tears. And it's so common. We can hold, and everything's okay. And we're doing all the things, and I'm doing all the things in the right order, and like just do the thing, and like it's okay. And we just go. But having a dedicated place and space, it's like 10 minutes every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be that extravagant. But for me, I've found that it has to be something, a place where I can go and just reboot, right? Where I can get my physical with my food plan, my emotional with my community, and then my spiritual is with my meditations in the morning. And so when I am consistent with these, then it's like, wow, I'm not being driven by cravings, right? That nourishment is happening physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and it just sets up for a way more balanced life experience where I'm not like floating on the highs and then just totally miserable with lows. There is a more balance, and that is what I would love for all of you. So, word to the wise, set yourself up for success in the beginning, right? So it's in the evening. What's your morning routine like? It's in the morning, and just making sure that you are nourished, because you deserve it. You are worth it. You are worth the time. You are worth the energy. You are worth the effort of change. All right. I love you so much. I hope you're having a great day and we'll talk to you soon.